David never imagined that a simple walk home from work would lead to an encounter that would turn his world upside down. He noticed a woman sitting alone on the sidewalk, her eyes reflecting a quiet resilience despite her worn appearance. Feeling compelled to help, he offered her a hand, unaware that this small act of kindness would spark a chain of events that would change his life forever. What secret does this moment hold, and how will it reshape David's life? Stay tuned to follow his journey of compassion and discovery. Let us know where you're watching from, and if this story speaks to you, don't forget to subscribe for more. The bustling city streets were alive with the rhythm of rush hour as David made his way home from another long day at the office. Briefcase in hand, he navigated through the sea of suits and smartphones, his mind already drifting to the comfort of his apartment and the promise of a quiet evening. As he turned the corner onto a less crowded street, something caught his eye. Amidst the urban chaos, a solitary figure sat on the sidewalk, her presence a stark contrast to the hurried passers-by. David's pace slowed as he approached, his gaze fixed on the woman's cardboard sign. Fell on hard times. Any help appreciated. She was black, probably in her mid-30s, with a face that spoke of both hardship and dignity. Her clothes were worn and mismatched, but there was something in her posture, in the way she held herself, that made David pause. Before he knew it, he found himself standing before her. "Excuse me," he said, his voice softer than he intended. "Are you all right?" The woman looked up, her eyes meeting his with a directness that took him by surprise. "As all right as one can be, given the circumstances," she replied, her voice clear and articulate. David shifted his weight, suddenly aware of the disparity between them. "I'm David," he offered, extending his hand before realizing the awkwardness of the gesture. To his relief, she took it, her grip firm despite her frail appearance. "Lisa," she said simply. "Lisa," David repeated, searching for the right words. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but how did you end up here?" A shadow passed over Lisa's face, and for a moment, David regretted his question. But then she spoke, her voice low and measured. "Life has a way of throwing curveballs, doesn't it?" She gave a small, rueful smile. "I had a good life once. A family, a career, dreams. Then tragedy struck, and it was like dominoes falling. One loss led to another, and before I knew it, I was here." David listened, captivated by the eloquence with which she spoke, even as she described her downfall. "What kind of tragedy?" he asked gently. Lisa's eyes clouded over. "The kind that tears families apart," she said vaguely. "I'd rather not go into details if you don't mind. Suffice it to say, I lost everything that mattered. And getting back on your feet? It's not as easy as people think." David nodded, a lump forming in his throat. He'd heard stories like this before, but something about Lisa's demeanor, the intelligence shining through despite her circumstances, moved him deeply. "I'm so sorry," he said, knowing the words were inadequate. "Is there anything I can do to help?" Lisa's eyes flickered with an unreadable emotion. "You're kind to ask," she said, "but I'm not looking for handouts. Just a chance to rebuild, you know?" David found himself nodding again, an idea forming in his mind. Before he could second-guess himself, he blurted out, "Actually, there might be something." Lisa raised an eyebrow, curiosity evident in her expression. "I work at Thornton Industries," David continued, the words tumbling out. "We're having this big office party next week. Employees are supposed to bring a +1, but—" He trailed off, suddenly embarrassed. "But you don't have a date," Lisa finished for him, a hint of amusement in her voice. David felt his cheeks flush. "Right? And I was thinking, maybe you'd like to come? I mean, it would be a chance for a nice meal at least. And who knows? There might be some networking opportunities." As soon as the words left his mouth, David realized how presumptuous they sounded. He hurried to add, "I'm sorry, that was probably inappropriate. I didn't mean to imply." But Lisa was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "You're inviting me, a homeless woman you just met, to be your date at a corporate party?" Put that way, it did sound absurd. David ran a hand through his hair, flustered. "I know it sounds crazy, but you seem, I don't know. There's something about you, Lisa. I think you'd fit right in, and maybe it could be a chance for something good to happen." Lisa was silent for a long moment, her eyes searching David's face. Finally, she spoke, her voice tinged with a mixture of doubt and hope. That's unexpected. But even if I wanted to go, I don't exactly have the right attire for a corporate shindig. David's enthusiasm overtook his common sense. I could help with that, he said quickly. We could find you something suitable. It wouldn't be anything extravagant, but he trailed off, realizing how his offer might be perceived. But to his surprise, Lisa didn't seem offended. Instead, she looked thoughtful. Why are you doing this, David? She asked softly. You don't know me. I could be anyone. David paused, considering her question. Why was he doing this? It wasn't just pity. There was something about Lisa that intrigued him, that made him want to know more. I guess, he said slowly, I believe everyone deserves a chance. And something tells me you have a lot to offer, Lisa. More than you might think right now. Lisa's expression softened, a glimmer of something, gratitude, hope, in her eyes. But then doubt clouded her features. I don't want to be anyone's charity case, she said firmly. It's not charity, David insisted. Think of it as an opportunity. For both of us. I get a fascinating +1, and you get a night off from... He gestured vaguely at the street around them. Lisa chuckled, a sound that transformed her face. You make a compelling argument, David. But I have one condition. Name it, David said, relieved that she was considering his offer. If I do this, Lisa said, her voice serious, I want the chance to repay your kindness someday. I don't know how or when, but I need you to understand that I'm not taking this lightly. David nodded, touched by her integrity. Of course. It's a deal. As they shook hands to seal their unusual agreement, David couldn't shake the feeling that he was embarking on something far more significant than a simple act of kindness. Little did he know just how life-changing this encounter would prove to be. So, David said, a hint of excitement creeping into his voice, shall we go find you something to wear? Lisa hesitated for a moment, then nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Lead the way, David. This should be interesting. As they set off together, an odd pair in the bustling city landscape, David felt a mix of anticipation and nervousness. What had he gotten himself into? And more importantly, what surprises did Lisa have in store? The bell above the door chimed softly as David and Lisa stepped into Second Chances, a modest clothing store nestled in a quiet corner of the city. The shop's name seemed fitting for their unusual situation, and David couldn't help but smile at the coincidence. Welcome to Second Chances, a cheerful voice called out. A middle-aged woman with kind eyes approached them, her gaze lingering curiously on Lisa's worn attire. How can I help you today? David cleared his throat, suddenly aware of how strange their request might sound. We're looking for an outfit for a corporate party, he explained, gesturing towards Lisa. Something elegant, but not too flashy. The shopkeeper's eyebrows rose slightly, but to her credit, she didn't miss a beat. Of course. Let's see what we can find. Follow me, dear, she said, leading Lisa towards a rack of dresses. As Lisa began to browse through the options, David hung back, feeling somewhat out of his element. He watched as she ran her fingers over the fabrics, her expression a mixture of longing and nostalgia. See anything you like? He asked, approaching her after a few minutes. Lisa turned to him, holding up a simple black dress. What do you think of this one? David studied the dress. It was elegant in its simplicity, a knee-length sheath dress with a modest neckline and 3/4 sleeves. I think it could work, he said. Why don't you try it on? Lisa nodded and disappeared into the changing room. As David waited, he found himself wondering about Lisa's past. The way she carried herself, the discerning look in her eyes as she examined the clothes, it all hinted at a life very different from her current circumstances. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the changing room door opening. As Lisa stepped out, David's breath caught in his throat. The transformation was astonishing. The dress fit Lisa perfectly, accentuating her figure and giving her an air of sophistication that seemed to erase all traces of her recent hardships. Her posture had changed, too. She stood taller, more confident, as if the dress had awakened something within her. Well, Lisa asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice. How does it look? David realized he had been staring. You look amazing, he managed to say. Truly elegant. A faint blush colored Lisa's cheeks. Thank you, she said softly. It's been a long time since I've worn anything like this. As Lisa tried on a few more outfits, David found himself captivated by the glimpses of the woman she must have been before her life took its unfortunate turn. Each dress seemed to reveal a different facet of her personality: confident, playful, sophisticated. Finally, they settled on the black dress, along with a pair of modest heels and a simple clutch purse. As David paid for the items, trying not to wince at the price, which, while reasonable, was more than he'd usually spend on clothes, he couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement about the upcoming party. Over the next few days, David provided for Lisa, making sure that she had a warm place to sleep and taking care of her meals. On the day of the party, they went to a small hair salon a few blocks away. As Lisa sat in the stylist's chair, David watched her transformation continue. The stylist worked her magic, washing and styling Lisa's hair into an elegant updo that perfectly complemented her new dress. During the styling process, David and Lisa fell into an easy conversation, sharing more about their lives than they had in their previous encounters. "So, David," Lisa said, catching his eye in the mirror, "tell me more about your job at Thornton Industries. What exactly do you do there?" David leaned forward, warming to the topic. "I'm in the marketing department. Mostly, I work on developing strategies for new product launches, analyzing market trends, that sort of thing." Lisa nodded, a look of interest on her face. "Sounds challenging. Do you enjoy it?" "Most of the time, yes," David replied. "But sometimes—" He trailed off, unsure how to express his feelings. "Sometimes you feel like you could be doing more." Lisa finished for him. David looked at her in surprise. "Exactly. How did you know?" Lisa smiled enigmatically. "Just a hunch. Many people in the corporate world feel that way at some point." Her comment piqued David's curiosity. "You seem to know a lot about the business world," he observed. "Did you work in that field before?" He left the question hanging, not wanting to bring up her current situation directly. A shadow passed over Lisa's face, quickly replaced by a neutral expression. "Oh, I've had some experience here and there," she said vaguely. "You pick up things, you know?" David nodded, sensing her reluctance to elaborate. He changed the subject, telling her about some of his colleagues and the office dynamics she might encounter at the party. As the stylist put the finishing touches on Lisa's hair, David couldn't help but marvel at the transformation. The woman looking back at him from the mirror was a far cry from the one he'd met on the street just days ago. "What do you think?" Lisa asked, turning to face him. "You look incredible," David said sincerely. "No one at the party will believe." He stopped himself, realizing how his words might sound. But Lisa just smiled. "That I was homeless a few days ago," she finished, her tone matter of fact. "It's okay, David. We both know the truth. But for one night, it'll be nice to pretend, won't it?" David nodded, feeling a mix of emotions he couldn't quite name. "Shall we grab some dinner?" he suggested. "We still have a few hours before the party." They found a small, cozy Italian restaurant not far from the salon. As they settled into their seats and perused the menus, David felt a sense of unreality wash over him. Here he was, having dinner with a woman he'd met on the street, about to take her to his company's biggest social event of the year. It was surreal, to say the least. As they waited for their food, David found himself opening up to Lisa in a way he hadn't expected. Perhaps it was the anticipation of the evening ahead, or maybe it was just Lisa's attentive, non-judgmental presence. But he found himself sharing his deepest hopes and fears about his career. "You know," he said, twirling pasta around his fork, "I've always dreamed of doing more than just marketing. I want to make a real difference in the company, to implement changes that could benefit not just our bottom line, but our employees and even the community." Lisa leaned forward, her eyes bright with interest. "That's admirable, David. What kind of changes do you have in mind?" Encouraged by her interest, David elaborated on his ideas, from implementing more sustainable practices to developing mentorship programs for underprivileged youth. As he spoke, he felt a renewed sense of passion for these long-held dreams. But, he concluded with a sigh, it's not easy to make those kinds of changes when you're just a mid-level employee. "Sometimes I feel like I'm stuck, you know? Like I'll never get the chance to really make a difference." Lisa was quiet for a moment, a thoughtful expression on her face. "You'd be surprised," she said finally. "Sometimes opportunities come from the most unexpected places. The key is to be ready when they do." There was something in her tone, a hint of personal experience perhaps, that made David curious, and he couldn't help but ask again. "It sounds like you're speaking from experience," he ventured. "Did you ever work in a corporate environment?" Lisa's expression flickered, a mix of emotions crossing her face, too quickly for David to interpret. "I've had some experiences in that world," she said carefully. "But that was a long time ago. A different life, really." David wanted to press further, intrigued by these hints of Lisa's past, but something in her demeanor made him hold back. Instead, he steered the conversation to lighter topics, and soon they were laughing over shared stories and observations about life in the city. As the evening progressed, David found himself increasingly drawn to Lisa. It wasn't just her physical transformation, although she was undeniably beautiful. It was her intelligence, her wit, the way she listened intently when he spoke, offering insights that often surprised him with their depth and perception. By the time they finished their meal, David realized he was feeling something he hadn't expected, a genuine connection with this woman who, just days ago, had been a stranger on the street. There was more to Lisa than met the eye, and he found himself eager to uncover her mysteries. As they left the restaurant and began walking towards the venue where the party was being held, David felt a mix of excitement and nervousness building in his chest. He glanced at Lisa, elegant and poised beside him, and tried to imagine how his colleagues would react when they saw them together. "Penny for your thoughts?" Lisa asked, noticing his pensive expression. David chuckled. "I was just thinking about how my coworkers are going to react when they see you," he admitted. "They're going to be, well, surprised, to say the least." Lisa raised an eyebrow. "Surprised that you managed to find such a stunning date," she teased, her eyes twinkling with amusement. David felt his cheeks warm. "Well, yes," he said, then hastily added, "Not that you're not stunning. You are. It's just, I'm not usually the guy who shows up with the most beautiful woman in the room, you know?" Lisa's expression softened. "David," she said gently, "beauty isn't just about appearance. From what I've seen, you're a kind, thoughtful man with big dreams and a good heart. That's far more attractive than just a pretty face." Her words touched David deeply, and he felt a surge of gratitude for this unexpected friendship. "Thank you, Lisa," he said sincerely. "I'm really glad I met you, you know that." Lisa squeezed his arm gently. "The feeling is mutual, David." As they approached the Grand Hotel where the party was being held, David felt his nervousness returning. He began to imagine various scenarios, his boss's reaction, the whispers of his colleagues, the questions that would inevitably come. What if they ask how we met? He wondered aloud. Lisa considered this for a moment. "We could tell them the truth," she suggested. "That you met me on the street and decided to invite me to the party." David looked at her, surprised. "You'd be okay with that?" Lisa shrugged. "Why not? It's the truth, after all. And it speaks volumes about your character, David. Not many people would do what you did." David nodded, touched by her willingness to be honest. "Okay," he said. "If anyone asks, we'll tell them the truth. Or at least a version of it." As they reached the hotel entrance, David took a deep breath. "Ready?" he asked, offering Lisa his arm. Lisa smiled, a mix of excitement and determination in her eyes. "Ready," she confirmed, linking her arm through his. Together, they stepped into the hotel lobby, the sounds of music and laughter drifting from the ballroom where the party was being held. David felt a thrill of anticipation. Whatever happened tonight, he knew it would be an evening to remember. As they approached the ballroom doors, David caught sight of their reflection in a large mirror. The image startled him. He and Lisa looked like the perfect power couple, elegant and confident. For a moment, he almost believed the illusion himself. "Here we go," he murmured, more to himself than to Lisa. Lisa gave his arm a reassuring squeeze. "Remember," she said softly, "you have nothing to be nervous about. Just be yourself, David. That's more than enough." With those words of encouragement, David took a deep breath and pushed open the doors to the ballroom. The noise of the party washed over them, the clinking of glasses, the hum of conversation, the soft strains of music from a live band in the corner. The grand ballroom of the Celestial Hotel buzzed with excitement as Thornton Industries' annual gala was in full swing. Chandeliers cast a warm glow over the elegantly dressed crowd, their light reflecting off champagne flutes and glittering jewelry. The air was filled with the soft strains of a string quartet, punctuated by bursts of laughter and animated conversation. As the heavy oak doors swung open, a hush fell over the room. David stepped in, his heart pounding in his chest, with Lisa on his arm. For a moment, it felt as if all eyes were on them, and in truth, many were. Lisa, resplendent in her simple black dress, exuded an elegance that seemed to light up the room. David, usually unremarkable in such gatherings, found himself standing taller, bolstered by the presence of his stunning companion. "Is that David from marketing?" a voice whispered, barely audible over the music. "Who's that woman with him?" another responded, not bothering to lower their tone. As they made their way further into the room, David could feel the weight of curious stares and hear the buzz of whispered conversations. He glanced at Lisa, worried that she might be uncomfortable with the attention, but found her smiling confidently, her posture relaxed and assured. "You okay?" he murmured, leaning in close. Lisa squeezed his arm reassuringly. "I'm fine, David. Don't worry about me. Just enjoy the evening." No sooner had she spoken than they were approached by a small group of David's colleagues. Among them was Sarah, a vivacious account manager known for her directness. "David," Sarah exclaimed, her eyes darting between him and Lisa. "You've been holding out on us. Who's your gorgeous date?" David took a deep breath, steeling himself for the inevitable questions. "Everyone, this is Lisa." "Lisa, these are some of my colleagues, Sarah, Tom, and Michael." Lisa smiled warmly, extending her hand. "It's a pleasure to meet you all. David's told me so much about his work at Thornton Industries." As they shook hands, David could see the curiosity burning in his coworker's eyes. It was Tom who finally asked the question they were all thinking. "So Lisa, how did you and David meet?" "We had no idea he was seeing anyone." David opened his mouth to respond, but Lisa beat him to it. "Oh, David and I met quite recently, actually. It's rather an unusual story." She paused, glancing at David with a mischievous twinkle in her eye. David nodded, silently giving her permission to continue. "You see," Lisa went on, "David found me on the street. I've been going through some difficult times, and he, in an act of incredible kindness, invited me to be his date for this evening." The group fell silent, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. David felt his face growing hot, unsure how his colleagues would react to this revelation. It was Michael who broke the silence, letting out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be damned, David. That's something else. You always were a stand-up guy." Sarah, however, looked skeptical. "On the street? Really? No offense, Lisa, but you look like you just stepped out of a fashion magazine. Are you sure you're not pulling our leg?" Lisa's smile didn't falter. "I assure you, it's the truth." David's generosity extended to helping me prepare for this evening. I'm deeply grateful for his kindness. As the conversation continued, David could see the wheels turning in his colleagues' heads. He caught snatches of whispered comments from others nearby. "Do you think he hired her? Maybe she's an escort. No way that story is true. She must be someone important." Despite the skepticism, David found himself relaxing as Lisa deftly navigated the conversation. She asked insightful questions about their roles in the company and shared anecdotes that had the group laughing. Her charm was undeniable, and even Sarah's initial skepticism seemed to be melting away. As the evening progressed, David and Lisa made their way around the room. To David's amazement, Lisa seemed completely at ease, engaging effortlessly with everyone they met, from junior employees to senior executives. Her knowledge of the industry was impressive, and more than once, David found himself wondering about her mysterious past. During a conversation with the head of research and development, Lisa made a comment about emerging trends in sustainable technology that left the executive wide-eyed. "I'm impressed, Lisa," he said. "You seem to have a deep understanding of our industry. Have you worked in the field before?" Lisa's response was characteristically vague yet charming. "Oh, I've had some experience here and there. One picks up a lot just by keeping one's ears open, don't you think?" As they moved away, David couldn't help but ask, "Lisa, how do you know so much about all this? You're not just good at small talk. You really seem to understand the intricacies of the business." Lisa gave him an enigmatic smile. "Let's just say I've had an interesting life, David. Perhaps I'll tell you about it someday." Despite his burning curiosity, David decided not to press the issue. Instead, he found himself simply enjoying Lisa's company and the way she seemed to elevate every conversation they joined. As the night wore on, David noticed a current of anticipation running through the crowd. He overheard snippets of conversation. "Is Mr. Thompson here yet? I heard he might not make it. The CEO always gives a speech at these things, doesn't he?" David turned to Lisa. "They're talking about our CEO, Robert Thompson. He usually makes an appearance at these events, but no one's seen him yet." Lisa nodded, a strange expression flickering across her face. "Yes, I gathered as much. Tell me, David, what's he like?" "Mr. Thompson?" David considered the question. "He's intense. Brilliant, of course. He built this company from the ground up, but he can be intimidating. Rumor has it he's been going through some personal issues lately, though no one knows the details." Lisa opened her mouth as if to say something, but at that moment, a hush fell over the room. David looked towards the entrance and saw that Mr. Thompson had finally arrived. Robert Thompson cut an imposing figure as he strode into the ballroom. Tall and distinguished, with silver hair and piercing blue eyes, he commanded attention without effort. As he made his way through the crowd, people parted before him, offering respectful nods and murmured greetings. David felt Lisa stiffen beside him. He turned to her, concerned, and was startled by the intensity of emotion on her face. She looked afraid, hopeful. He couldn't quite read her expression. "Lisa," he said softly, "are you all right?" But Lisa's eyes were fixed on Mr. Thompson, who was now scanning the room as if looking for someone. Suddenly, his gaze locked onto their location, and David saw the CEO's eyes widen in shock. In an instant, Mr. Thompson was moving towards them, his pace quickening with each step. The crowd parted before him, whispers of confusion rising in his wake. David felt rooted to the spot, utterly bewildered by the unfolding scene. As Mr. Thompson reached them, David opened his mouth to introduce Lisa, but the words died on his lips as he saw the look that passed between his CEO and his date. "Elizabeth?" Mr. Thompson's voice was barely more than a whisper, filled with a mixture of disbelief and hope. Lisa, or Elizabeth, as David now realized, stepped forward, her eyes never leaving Mr. Thompson's face. "Hello, Robert," she said softly. The room had gone eerily quiet, everyone straining to hear and understand what was happening. David felt as if he were watching a play, completely divorced from the reality he thought he knew. Mr. Thompson reached out a trembling hand, gently touching Elizabeth's cheek as if to assure himself she was real. "Is it really you? After all this time?" Elizabeth nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "Yes, Robert. It's me. I'm sorry I've been away so long." In a move that shocked everyone present, Robert Thompson, the famously composed CEO of Thornton Industries, pulled Elizabeth into a tight embrace, his shoulders shaking with barely suppressed emotion. "You came back," he murmured, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I thought I'd lost you forever." The silence in the room was deafening. David stood frozen, his mind racing to make sense of what he was witnessing. The woman he'd met on the street, the woman he'd brought to this party, was Robert Thompson's wife? How was this possible? As the couple separated, Mr. Thompson kept one arm around Elizabeth's waist, turning to face the stunned crowd. His face was a mixture of joy and determination as he addressed the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice regaining its usual authoritative tone, "I apologize for my late arrival and for this unconventional scene. Allow me to introduce, or rather reintroduce, my wife, Elizabeth Thompson." A collective gasp went up from the assembled guests. David felt as if the room was spinning. He'd known Lisa Elizabeth for only a few days, but in that time, he'd started to care for her deeply. To discover that she was not only married but married to his CEO, it was almost too much to process. Mr. Thompson continued, either oblivious to, or choosing to ignore the shock rippling through the room. "Elizabeth has been away for some time. Her return is unexpected but more welcome than I can express." Elizabeth spoke up then, her voice clear and steady despite the emotion evident on her face. "I owe you all an explanation, I'm sure, and you'll have it in time. For now, I'll simply say that I needed to step away from my life for a while to gain a new perspective. I've learned a great deal during my time away about myself and about the world we live in. She turned to David then, a look of genuine affection and gratitude on her face. I owe a particular debt of gratitude to David here, who showed me extraordinary kindness when I was at my lowest point. He is a credit to this company and to humanity. David felt the weight of every eye in the room upon him. He wanted to speak, to ask the 1,000 questions swirling in his mind, but found himself unable to form words. Mr. Thompson looked at David, a mix of gratitude and curiosity in his eyes. "David," he said, "I don't know the full story of how you and Elizabeth met, but it seems I owe you a great deal. We'll speak more about this later, I'm sure." As murmurs began to rise in the room, people struggling to process this unexpected turn of events, Mr. Thompson raised his voice once more. "I know you all have questions. Elizabeth and I have much to discuss ourselves. But for now, I ask that you respect our privacy and allow us this moment of reunion. Please enjoy the rest of the evening. There will be time for explanations later." With that, Mr. Thompson began to lead Elizabeth away, presumably to find a more private place to talk. As they passed David, Elizabeth paused, reaching out to squeeze his hand. "Thank you, David," she said softly, "for everything. I promise we'll talk soon." And then they were gone, leaving David standing alone in a sea of bewildered partygoers. The room quickly filled with the buzz of excited conversations as people tried to make sense of what they'd just witnessed. David felt a hand on his shoulder and turned to see Sarah, her eyes wide with disbelief. "David," she said, "what just happened? Did you know? About Elizabeth?" David shook his head, still struggling to find his voice. "No," he finally managed. "I had no idea. I really did meet her on the street. She seemed—" He trailed off, unable to reconcile the homeless woman he'd met with the poised, elegant wife of Robert Thompson. It was as if the world had suddenly tilted on its axis, leaving him struggling to find his footing. As the party continued around him, guests alternating between excited gossip and attempts at normalcy, David found himself moving in a daze towards the bar. He needed a drink, needed time to think, to process the events of the evening. The bartender gave him a sympathetic look as he approached. "Rough night, huh?" he said, already reaching for a glass. David nodded, accepting the whiskey with gratitude. As he sipped the amber liquid, feeling its warmth spread through him, he tried to make sense of his jumbled thoughts and emotions. He'd come to this party hoping to impress his colleagues, maybe even catch the eye of his superiors. Instead, he'd unwittingly played a part in a drama he couldn't begin to understand. The woman he'd thought he was rescuing had turned out to be someone else entirely, someone with a past and connections he couldn't have imagined. As he stood there, lost in thought, David realized that this night had changed everything. His relationship with Elizabeth, whatever it had been, was irrevocably altered. His standing in the company, too, would likely never be the same. What happened now? Would Elizabeth keep her promise to explain? Would Mr. Thompson want to know more about how David had met his wife? And how would this affect his career? David took another sip of his whiskey, his mind swirling with questions. One thing was certain, life at Thornton Industries was about to get very interesting. As the party continued around him, a surreal mix of shocked whispers and forced normalcy, David found himself both dreading and anticipating what the coming days would bring. Whatever happened, he knew that his simple act of kindness on the street had set in motion events that would change not just his life, but the lives of everyone at Thornton Industries. With a deep breath, David straightened his shoulders and turned back to face the room. Whatever came next, he would face it head on. After all, he thought with a wry smile, he'd already survived the most shocking office party in Thornton Industries history. How much more surprising could things get? Little did he know, the revelations of the night were only the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything he thought he knew about business, compassion, and the power of unexpected connections. As the party began to wind down, David found himself in a daze, still processing the events of the evening. The ballroom, once filled with lively chatter and music, now hummed with hushed conversations and speculative whispers. Everywhere he looked, he saw small groups huddled together, no doubt discussing the shocking revelation about Elizabeth Thompson. David nursed his drink at the bar, feeling oddly detached from the scene around him. He had come to this party hoping to make a good impression, maybe even advance his career a little. Instead, he had unwittingly become the center of attention in a drama he couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams. David, a familiar voice broke through his reverie. He turned to see Jack, the senior manager from marketing, approaching with a concerned look on his face. "Hey, Jack," David managed, forcing a weak smile. Jack settled onto the bar stool next to him, signaling the bartender for a drink. "Hell of a night, huh?" he said, his tone a mixture of awe and sympathy. David let out a humorless chuckle. "You could say that again." They sat in silence for a moment, each lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Jack spoke up. "Look, David, I don't know exactly what happened here tonight, but I want you to know that what you did taking in someone you thought was homeless, trying to help them, that's admirable. Whatever else comes of this, you should be proud of yourself." David felt a lump forming in his throat. "Thanks, Jack. I appreciate that. I can't believe I didn't know. I mean, how could I not have realized who she was?" Jack shook his head. "Don't beat yourself up about it. From what I gather, Mrs. Thompson has been gone for quite some time. And if she was trying to hide her identity, well, she obviously did a damn good job of it." As they continued to talk, David felt some of the tension begin to ease from his shoulders. Jack's words of support meant more to him than he could express. Suddenly, a hush fell over the room. David looked up to see Mr. Thompson re-entering the ballroom, Elizabeth by his side. The CEO's face was a mask of composure, but David could see the mix of emotions in his eyes: joy, confusion, and something that looked almost like apprehension. Mr. Thompson cleared his throat, and the room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady despite the circumstances, "I want to thank you all for your understanding and discretion this evening. I know that the events of tonight have come as a shock to many of you. They have, in fact, come as a shock to me as well." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room before landing on David. "I owe a particular debt of gratitude to one of our employees, David Anderson from the marketing department. David, would you please join us up here?" David felt his heart leap into his throat. On shaky legs, he made his way through the crowd, acutely aware of the eyes following his every move. As he reached Mr. Thompson and Elizabeth, he saw a flash of warmth in Elizabeth's eyes, mixed with what looked like regret. "David," Mr. Thompson said, placing a hand on his shoulder, "I understand that you met my wife under unusual circumstances, that you extended kindness and help to her when she appeared to be in need. For that, I cannot thank you enough." David swallowed hard, struggling to find his voice. I just did what anyone would do, sir," he managed. Mr. Thompson shook his head, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "No, David. What you did is far from common. You saw someone in need, and you reached out to help without thought of reward or recognition. That kind of compassion is rare, and it's exactly the kind of quality we value at Thornton Industries." He turned to address the room once more. "Many of you may be wondering about the circumstances that led to tonight's events. I assure you, all will be explained in due time. For now, I ask for your continued discretion and understanding. Elizabeth's return is a deeply personal matter for us, and we appreciate your respect for our privacy as we navigate this unexpected reunion." As Mr. Thompson finished speaking, the room erupted into applause. David stood there, feeling both exposed and oddly buoyed by the CEO's words. He glanced at Elizabeth, who gave him a small, grateful smile. "David," she said softly, "I owe you an explanation and an apology. Would you be willing to meet with Robert and me tomorrow? There's much to discuss." David nodded, still somewhat dazed. "Of course, Mrs. Thompson. I'd like that." As the party began to disperse, David found himself surrounded by colleagues offering congratulations and asking questions he couldn't answer. Through it all, his mind was racing, trying to make sense of the night's events and wondering what tomorrow's meeting would bring. The next morning dawned bright and clear, a stark contrast to the tumultuous emotions swirling inside David as he made his way to Thornton Industries headquarters. He had barely slept, his mind replaying the events of the previous night over and over again. As he entered the imposing glass and steel building, David felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. The security guard at the desk gave him a curious look as he checked in. No doubt, word of last night's events had spread quickly. "Mr. Anderson?" a polite voice called out as he reached the executive floor. A smartly dressed assistant approached him. "Mr. and Mrs. Thompson are expecting you. Please follow me." David was led to a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Mr. Thompson stood as he entered, extending his hand in greeting. Elizabeth was seated on a plush leather sofa, looking every inch the corporate wife in a tailored suit, a far cry from the woman David had met on the street just days ago. "David, thank you for coming," Mr. Thompson said, gesturing for him to take a seat. "I know you must have 1,000 questions. We'll do our best to answer them." David settled into an armchair, his gaze moving between Mr. Thompson and Elizabeth. "I appreciate that, sir. I have to admit, I'm still trying to wrap my head around all of this." Elizabeth leaned forward, her eyes meeting David's. "David, I want to start by apologizing. I never meant to deceive you. When you found me on that street, I was at the lowest point in my life. Your kindness, it meant more to me than you could possibly know." David nodded slowly, encouraging her to continue. Elizabeth took a deep breath before launching into her story. "About 3 years ago, I hit a crisis point in my life. Robert and I had been married for 15 years, and on the surface, we had everything: success, wealth, respect. But I felt empty, lost, like I'd lost touch with who I really was and what really mattered in life." Mr. Thompson reached out, taking his wife's hand. The gesture spoke volumes about their relationship, and David felt a pang of something he couldn't quite name. Regret, perhaps, or a sense of loss for something he'd never really had. Elizabeth continued, her voice growing stronger. "I decided I needed to step away from everything, to strip away all the trappings of our life and find myself again. So, without telling anyone, not even Robert, I left. I gave away most of my possessions, kept only a small amount of cash, and set out to live on the streets." David's eyes widened in disbelief. "But why? Why go to such extremes?" "I needed to understand," Elizabeth explained, her eyes distant. "I needed to know what it was like to have nothing, to rely on the kindness of strangers. I wanted to see the world from a completely different perspective. And I did. Oh, David, the things I saw, the people I met, it changed me in ways I'm still trying to understand." Mr. Thompson spoke up then, his voice tinged with a mixture of pain and admiration. "When Elizabeth disappeared, I was devastated. I hired private investigators, launched nationwide searches, but she had vanished without a trace. Those were the hardest years of my life." Elizabeth squeezed her husband's hand. "I know I caused you pain, Robert. That was never my intention. But this journey, it was something I needed to do. For myself, and ultimately, for us." David sat back, trying to absorb the magnitude of what he was hearing. "So, when I found you on the street, I had been living rough for nearly 3 years, Elizabeth confirmed. "I was at my lowest point. I was tired, hungry, and beginning to question everything I'd done. And then you came along, David. Your kindness, your genuine desire to help, it reminded me of why I'd set out on this journey in the first place. To find the good in humanity, to understand the struggles of those less fortunate." Mr. Thompson leaned forward, his gaze intense. "David, when you brought Elizabeth to that party, you didn't just reunite me with my wife. You showed us both something invaluable, that there are still people in this world willing to extend a hand to those in need, without expectation of reward. You've reminded us of the values that should be at the core of not just our personal lives, but our business as well." David felt overwhelmed by their words. I don't know what to say. I just did what felt right at the time, and that," Elizabeth said softly, "is exactly what makes it so remarkable. You acted out of pure compassion, David. Do you know how rare that is in today's world?" Mr. Thompson nodded in agreement. "Which brings us to why we asked you here today, David. Elizabeth's journey has opened both our eyes to some hard truths about our company and our society. We want to make changes, real, meaningful changes that will impact not just our bottom line, but the lives of people in need." David leaned forward, intrigued. "What kind of changes, sir?" "We want to launch a major corporate social responsibility initiative," Mr. Thompson explained. "One that goes beyond the usual PR-friendly donations and actually makes a tangible difference in people's lives. We're talking about job training programs for the homeless, partnerships with shelters and food banks, maybe even a microloan program for people trying to get back on their feet." Elizabeth picked up where her husband left off. "And we want you to lead this initiative, David. Your compassion, your willingness to help others. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need for this project." David felt as if the wind had been knocked out of him. "Me? But I'm just a mid-level marketing guy. I don't have any experience with this kind of thing." Mr. Thompson smiled. "Sometimes, David, experience is less important than heart. You have the instincts, the compassion, and the drive to make this work. We'll provide you with all the resources and support you need." "What do you say?" David's mind was reeling. Just days ago, he had been dreaming of making a difference in the company, of doing something meaningful with his career. And now, here was an opportunity beyond his wildest dreams. I don't know what to say," he stammered. "This is incredible. Are you sure I'm the right person for this?" Elizabeth reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "David, when you found me on that street, you didn't see a homeless woman. You saw a human being in need. That's the kind of perspective we need leading this initiative. You have a unique understanding now. You've seen both sides of the coin. You can bridge the gap between the corporate world and those who need our help the most." David took a deep breath, feeling a sense of purpose settling over him. "Okay," he said, a smile spreading across his face. "I'm in. Let's do this." Mr. Thompson beamed, standing up to shake David's hand. "Excellent. We'll set up a meeting later this week to start hammering out the details. This is the beginning of a new chapter for Thornton Industries, David. And for you." As David left the office a short while later, his head spinning with ideas and possibilities, he couldn't help but marvel at the strange turns his life had taken. A simple act of kindness on the street had led to this, a chance to make a real difference in the world. He thought back to the woman he'd met on the street, Lisa, as he'd known her then. She'd seemed so lost, so vulnerable, and yet she'd had the courage to strip away everything she knew in search of a greater truth. David felt a renewed sense of admiration for Elizabeth Thompson and the journey she'd undertaken. As he reached the lobby, David paused, looking around at the bustling employees rushing to and fro. How many of them, he wondered, had ever truly seen the world beyond these glass walls? How many had extended a hand to someone in need, with no expectation of reward? With a renewed sense of purpose, David stepped out into the sunlight. He had work to do, important work that could change lives. As he walked down the busy street, he found himself really seeing the people around him for perhaps the first time. The hurried businesswoman, the tired construction worker, the elderly man struggling with his groceries. Each of them had a story. Each of them mattered. David's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Elizabeth. "Thank you again, David, for everything. This is just the beginning." He smiled, tucking the phone back into his pocket. Yes, this was just the beginning. And what a beginning it was. In the days and weeks that followed, David threw himself into his new role with a passion that surprised even him. He met with community leaders, visited shelters and soup kitchens, and spent countless hours researching successful social programs around the world. The initiative, which they named Thornton Lifeline, quickly took shape. It was more than just a corporate responsibility program. It was a comprehensive approach to addressing homelessness and poverty in their community. David's first major project was setting up a job training center in one of the city's most disadvantaged neighborhoods. The center offered classes in everything from basic computer skills to advanced manufacturing techniques, all taught by volunteers from Thornton Industries. As he stood at the podium on the day of the center's grand opening, David felt a sense of pride unlike anything he'd experienced before. He looked out at the crowd, a mix of Thornton employees, local residents, and media, and saw hope in their eyes. "Today," he began, his voice strong and clear, "we're not just opening a building. We're opening doors of opportunity. We're extending a hand to those who need it most, offering not just help, but hope." As he spoke, David caught sight of Elizabeth and Robert Thompson in the front row. Elizabeth gave him an encouraging nod, her eyes shining with pride. Robert, too, looked on with approval, a man transformed by his wife's journey and the new direction of his company. After the ceremony, as David mingled with the crowd, he felt a tap on his shoulder. He turned to find a familiar face, Sarah, his colleague from marketing. "David," she said, her voice filled with admiration, "I have to say, when I first heard about your new role, I was skeptical. But seeing all this..." She gestured around at the bustling center. It's incredible. You've really found your calling, haven't you? David smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. I think I have, Sarah. Who would have thought that a chance encounter on the street could lead to all this? As the day wound down, David found a quiet moment to slip away from the crowds. He stepped outside, breathing in the cool evening air. The street was busy with people heading home from work, much like it had been on that fateful day when he'd met Elizabeth. A figure approached him, a woman, her clothes worn and tattered, a cardboard sign clutched in her hands. For a moment, David was transported back to that day, half expecting to see Elizabeth's face looking back at him. But this was a different woman, her face lined with age and hardship. She looked at David warily, clearly unsure of his reaction to her presence. Without hesitation, David smiled warmly. Good evening, he said. Are you hungry? We have plenty of food inside from the event. Why don't you join us? The woman's eyes widened in surprise, then filled with grateful tears. As David gently led her inside, he felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. This was why he was here. This was what it was all about. Later that night, as David prepared to leave, he found Elizabeth waiting for him by the door. You did good today, David, she said softly. Really good? David nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. Thank you, Elizabeth, for everything. If you hadn't taken that journey, if we hadn't met that day. Elizabeth placed a hand on his arm. Sometimes, David, the universe has a way of putting the right people in the right place at the right time. You were meant to find me that day, just as you were meant to be here, doing this work. As David drove home that night, he reflected on the incredible journey of the past few months. From a chance encounter on the street to leading a major corporate initiative, it all seemed like a dream. But it wasn't a dream. It was real, and it was just the beginning. David knew that there would be challenges ahead, that changing lives and changing a corporate culture wouldn't always be easy. But he was ready for it. More than ready, he was excited for it. As he pulled into his driveway, David's phone buzzed with a text. It was from Mr. Thompson. Great work today, David. Remember, this is just the start. Together, we're going to change the world. David smiled, feeling a mix of excitement and determination. He knew Mr. Thompson was right. This was just the beginning. Over the next year, David threw himself into his work with a passion that surprised even himself. The Thornton Lifeline initiative grew rapidly, expanding its reach far beyond the initial job training center. Under David's leadership, the program launched a series of innovative projects. As the Thornton Lifeline initiative gained momentum, it began to attract attention beyond the local community. News outlets picked up the story, praising Thornton Industries for its innovative approach to corporate social responsibility. Other companies began to take notice, reaching out to David for advice on starting their own programs. One crisp autumn morning, almost exactly a year after the launch of Thornton Lifeline, David found himself back in Mr. Thompson's office. The CEO's face was serious as David took a seat across from him. David, Mr. Thompson began, I hope you know how proud we are of the work you've done this past year. The impact you've made, it's beyond anything we could have imagined. David nodded, feeling a mix of pride and humility. Thank you, sir. It's been an incredible journey. Mr. Thompson leaned forward, his eyes intense. Which is why what I'm about to say isn't easy. David, we've been approached by a coalition of major corporations. They want to take the Thornton Lifeline model national. David's eyes widened. National? That's amazing. It is, Mr. Thompson agreed. But here's the thing, David. They want you to lead it. The words hung in the air between them. David felt as if the wind had been knocked out of him. Me? But what about Thornton Industries? What about the work we're doing here? Mr. Thompson smiled, a hint of sadness in his eyes. The work will continue, David. We've built something incredible here, something that will last. But this is an opportunity to impact lives on a scale we never dreamed possible. David sat back, his mind reeling. A year ago, he'd been a mid-level marketing executive, dreaming of making a difference. Now, he was being offered the chance to shape national policy on corporate social responsibility. I don't know what to say, he managed. Say you'll think about it, Mr. Thompson replied. Take some time, talk it over with Elizabeth. She's been as much a part of this journey as any of us. David nodded, still in a daze. As he left the office, he found himself wandering down to the Thornton Lifeline Center. The place was bustling with activity. A computer class in one corner, a resume workshop in another, a group of women excitedly discussing their new small business venture. As he watched, David felt a lump form in his throat. This was what it was all about. Real people, real lives being changed. Could he really leave this behind? Lost in thought, he almost didn't notice the woman approaching him until she spoke. "Excuse me, are you David Anderson?" He turned to find a young woman, maybe in her early 20s, looking at him with a mix of nervousness and determination. "Yes, I am," he replied with a smile. "How can I help you?" The woman took a deep breath. "My name is Tanya. I just wanted to thank you. A year ago, I was living in my car, no job, no prospects. Then I heard about this place. The job training program, the microloan. It changed my life. I've got my own catering business now, and I'm even hiring other people from the program." David felt his heart swell with emotion. "Tanya, that's incredible. I'm so happy for you." Tanya smiled, her eyes shining. "I just wanted you to know. What you're doing here, it matters. It really, really matters." As Tanya walked away, David felt a sense of clarity wash over him. He pulled out his phone and dialed a familiar number. "Elizabeth? It's David. I need your advice." Later that evening, David found himself sitting in the Thompsons' living room, nursing a cup of coffee as he explained the situation to Elizabeth. "So that's where things stand," he concluded. "This national initiative, it's an incredible opportunity. But I can't help feeling like I'd be abandoning what we've built here." Elizabeth was quiet for a moment, her eyes thoughtful. "David," she said finally, "do you remember the night we met? When you found me on that street?" David nodded, the memory still vivid in his mind. "You didn't just help one person that night," Elizabeth continued. "Your act of kindness set off a chain of events that has already touched thousands of lives. Imagine what you could do on a national scale." David sighed. "But what about the people here? The Tanyas of the world, who are just finding their footing?" Elizabeth smiled. "The foundation you've built here is strong, David. It won't crumble just because you're not here every day. And think of how many more Tanyas there are out there in cities across the country who could benefit from what you've learned." As David mulled over her words, Robert Thompson joined them, settling into an armchair with his own cup of coffee. "You know," he said, his voice thoughtful, "when Elizabeth came back, it forced me to reevaluate everything. My priorities, the way I ran the company, the legacy I wanted to leave. David, you've been a big part of that transformation. But maybe, just maybe, it's time for you to start your own legacy." David looked between the two of them, feeling a mix of gratitude and awe. "How did I get so lucky," he mused, "to have mentors like you?" Elizabeth laughed. "I think we're the lucky ones, David. Now, what do you say we start planning how to take Thornton Lifeline national?" The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. David worked tirelessly with the Thompsons and the coalition of corporations to lay the groundwork for the national initiative. They hired a team to take over the day-to-day operations of Thornton Lifeline, ensuring that the local programs would continue to thrive. On his last day at Thornton Industries, David found himself back at the job training center where it had all begun. As he walked through the bustling halls, he was stopped every few feet by people wanting to shake his hand, to thank him, to wish him well. At the end of the day, as he prepared to leave, he found a surprise waiting for him. A gathered crowd of Thornton employees, program participants, and community members. Mr. Thompson stood at the front, a warm smile on his face. "David," he began, his voice carrying across the hushed room, "when you joined Thornton Industries, you were a promising young marketing executive. But you've become so much more than that. You've become a beacon of hope, a catalyst for change, and an inspiration to us all." David felt a lump form in his throat as Mr. Thompson continued. "As you embark on this new chapter, know that you carry with you not just our gratitude, but our unwavering support. The work you've done here has changed Thornton Industries forever, and we're committed to continuing that legacy." Elizabeth stepped forward then, her eyes shining with pride. "David, a year ago, you extended a hand to a stranger on the street. Today, you're extending that same hand to countless individuals across the nation. Never forget the power of that simple act of kindness." As the crowd erupted in applause, David felt overwhelmed by emotion. He looked out at the sea of faces, colleagues, friends, people whose lives had been touched by Thorn and Lifeline, and felt a profound sense of gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "All of you. What we've built here, it's not about me. It's about all of us coming together to make a difference. And that work doesn't end today. It's just beginning." As the gathering dispersed, David found himself alone in the center, taking one last look around. A voice behind him made him turn. "So, this is really it, huh?" It was Tanya, the young woman who had thanked him just months ago. She was smiling, but there was a hint of sadness in her eyes. "It is," David replied. "But it's not an ending. It's a new beginning." Tanya nodded. "You know, when I first came here, I thought my life was over. I never imagined I'd be where I am now. You gave me that chance, David. You gave all of us a chance." David felt his eyes well up. "Tanya, you did the hard work. You took that chance and ran with it. And now it's your turn to extend that hand to someone else." Tanya straightened, a look of determination crossing her face. "You're right. And I will. We all will. Your legacy here, we'll keep it going. I promise." As David finally left the center, he felt a mix of emotions: sadness at leaving, excitement for the future, and above all, a deep sense of purpose. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Scaling up Thorn and Lifeline to a national level would bring new challenges, new obstacles to overcome. But as he drove away, his car packed for the move to his new life, David felt ready. Ready to face those challenges, ready to keep extending that hand to those in need, ready to keep believing in the power of compassion to change lives. He thought back to that fateful night, to the woman he'd met on the street who had turned out to be so much more than she seemed. Elizabeth's journey had changed her life, had changed the Thompsons' lives, had changed David's life. And now, together, they were poised to change so many more. As he reached the highway, David's phone buzzed with a text. It was from Elizabeth. "Remember, David, this is just the beginning." David smiled, feeling a surge of determination. Yes, this was just the beginning. And what a beginning it was. The road stretched out before him, full of promise and possibility. David Anderson, once a mid-level marketing executive, now a catalyst for national change, drove on towards his future. He didn't know exactly what lay ahead, but he knew one thing for certain: he would keep extending that hand, keep believing in the power of kindness, keep working to make the world a little bit better, one life at a time. And somewhere out there, on a street corner in some distant city, there was someone in need, someone whose life was about to change. All it would take was one person to stop, to see them, to extend a hand. David was ready to be that person, again and again and again. The journey that had begun with a chance encounter on a city street was far from over. In fact, it was just getting started. If this story touched your heart, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want more stories of unexpected twists and acts of compassion, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.